Greetings and salutations to our fine podcast audience. Welcome to 3 Ps in a Pod, episode 263.
We made it.
And we're still in our mini-series.
We are.
The
what was it called? Things we didn't say on Sunday?
Things we talk about when nobody sends us a question.
What we didn't say on Sunday.
What we didn't say on Sunday.
What we didn't say on Sunday.
That's the better name.
That's right.
You know, I've been noticing now because of the way that, I guess because of TikTok or whatever, but all podcasts now have fancy podcast studios because everyone's filming their podcasts as well because you got to do cross-promotion on all the platforms. I think we need to get ourselves some big fancy mics, even if they're fake mics. Get ourselves a table with a big fancy mic, put some neon signs behind us.
People don't realize we got them taped to or clipped to our shirt right here.
I feel like we need, and when we need big old headphones.
I don't understand that.
I think it's for the sake of people. Sometimes when you have people who aren't in the studio, or I will say this.
I mean, if Charlie wanted to say something to me in the ears while he goes, "Hey,"
that, or if I had a person,
you guys shut up. You guys something on
your
nose.
I've also heard people say it's to help not talk over one another because you have their voice. Oh, you have your own voice in your ear.
I see.
You don't talk.
I think what people like most about this podcast is how much we talk over one
another. I do too.
I think what they like best about this podcast is that it is incomprehensible. You can't understand it because we're constantly interrupting one another.
Just thinking, eventually, are we going to all in society have to put earphones on? I'm tired of you interrupting. Put these headphones on. That way you can only hear my voice.
I think half the people I see out on the stores and streets these days got earbuds in.
I'm just saying.
I wonder, what are they listening to?
If we want to compete with the Joe Rogan experience, we need to up our game a little.
Well, and go 8 times longer than we currently go.
Be going on. What's that other one that?
Impulsive.
Thank you. Okay, I knew you would get what I was saying. Yes, impulsive. The Logan Paul. That's another big one. Logan Paul's impulsive. So, there you go.
Who is Logan Paul?
He was on
We're cross-promoting Logan Paul.
He was originally on a Nickelodeon show.
Disney Bizarre
Vark. Oh my God. He's the one who fought.
I'm so out of
Did
touch.
he fight Mike Tyson or was his brother? Jake Paul fought Mike Tyson.
I've heard that name.
Yeah, Logan Paul's his brother. They have a podcast together. And it's called Impulsive.
Okay.
All right. Well,
that's enough of that. So, what are we
see you next week?
No. So, Nathan, what are we going to say today that we didn't say on Sunday? We're going to speak to, we're going to talk to the single people.
We're going to talk to all the single ladies.
All the single ladies.
And all the single fellas.
And the fellas.
And the single fellas.
The dudes.
So, yeah, the thought I'd had was we know that there are a good amount of people, not only in our congregation, but just statistically in the United States, so maybe some of our listeners who you listen to the messages, you heard us talk about marriage, but you're not married, and maybe that's because you've never been married or because you're divorced, and you hear all of these different things we talk about. Maybe you've caught the vision of marriage that we've talked about, this idea of this for you, for us, for life kind of covenant, and you go, I want that, or maybe you don't even want it, but you go, I think that's what God has in mind.
It might be a good idea.
Maybe I should try it.
Maybe I should try it.
Now, maybe you're not married right now and you heard what we said and you said, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
Which is very possible.
Well, I'll say to you what I say to everybody that thinks whatever God says is nonsense. Run after that. You should. We can't make you do anything, and God isn't trying to make you do anything. Nope. If you think you can get everything you want out of life and go the opposite direction, you should run harder after that.
Yeah. Our goal has been to try and say, this is what God intended, at least the best that we understand from the scriptures of what he intended for people to live. One, in a covenant with him has been our primary goal, but then the last 4 weeks has been in this covenant of marriage, which is a picture of that bigger covenant.
I think I should add to the end of that. Inevitably, you will run into a wall if you run after it long and hard, because we believe God is God is describing reality.
Yeah.
And as Dallas Willard used to say, reality is what you run into when you realize you were wrong.
That's right. So we're trying to explain, hey, this is what we see God describes a covenant as, and specifically in this case, the covenant of marriage. And, you may disagree with that. Okay. But for those of you who don't, and you do see it and you say, hey, I do think that's what God wants, but that's not my reality right now. Maybe you're in a relationship, but it's not marriage. Maybe you're single and you're not dating anybody yet. Maybe, like I said, you're divorced and you're going at some point, I might want to get remarried. How do I go about building that kind of thing? Because maybe you've never heard that before and you don't know that anyone else is out there looking for this kind of marriage. How do I go about when I'm looking for my one, when I'm looking for my person? What do I need to do? What should I be looking for? Now, maybe no one is asking this question. Well, I hope there's someone who's asking this question.
I'll say it this way, in that when you said looking for my one, and Craig Rochelle, who's a pastor, is the first person I ever heard say it this way, and I liked it. I can't always remember to say it. He said every follower of Jesus is actually looking for their two, because I've already chosen the one. I already have a covenant relationship with the one, and what I'm looking for is my two that will walk that way. I'll walk with them as their two, and they'll be my two, and we'll walk together toward Jesus. Which brings us to the illustration of what you talked about in week number 2 of the triangle that I got taught.
Yep.
That was week 1 of your part of the marriage.
Yeah. Well, and so I'll throw it out this way. If you, like Nathan said, if this vision is something that you want, and it's something that you would say, I think that's what marriage ought to be, I want to be married, then it sounds so simplistic, but you got to find somebody who agrees with you,
right? Who's
on that same track. And what I see in a lot of people in that stage of life, is the old song, looking for love in all the wrong places. You're hanging out in places where there ain't nobody who wants that.
Yeah.
And you're hoping to find that, gem right in the middle of it somehow, but
diamond in the rough,
or whatever it is. And the chances of that are so small because you're in a place where that's not the culture that's being promoted. That's not the direction that anybody's pointing their life in. And so, I mean, to be real blunt, if your goal, your aim is to live in the kingdom of God, you need to go do that and look around. And who else is doing that? And what, where are the spaces where the kingdom is coming from, as on earth as it is in heaven?
Yeah.
And hopefully there's a member of the opposite sex that's hanging out in that spot doing the same thing. And you can go, wow, there's somebody that's doing what I want to do. Let's do that together.
Yeah. I think
that's where I would start.
Yeah. I think, so the picture that Jason used of the triangle of it's me and my spouse and God's at the top. And the closer we both get to God, the closer we actually get to each other, because we're both growing closer to God. So the closer we get to him, closer we get to each other. If that's my goal, like Jason said, I think starting with who's someone who wants to do this kind of thing. I frequently have said to young couples when I was doing youth ministry, and then now because I hang out with a lot of people in the millennial generation have just never been married. So they're coming in on 40, 45 and have just never been married. Done some dating, obviously done some even living together. But I know many Christian single people who have never lived with anyone, done some dating, and just never been married. And so the thing I frequently say when they kind of think they found someone, they're kind of like, maybe this might be the person, right? And what often that means is we got great chemistry. We get along really well. We like each other. We got a lot of common interests or whatever, all the different kind of things that equate to chemistry. They laugh at my jokes, which I tell them, it's a dude. She's not always laughing at your jokes. You'll find out when you get married. Yeah, she don't think you're as funny as you think you're funny. But anyway, you have these little chemistry moments. I said the 3 things I've often highlighted for people. I would try to figure out, are we on the same page on these 3 kind of big values? The number 1 is obviously faith. Do they take their walk with Jesus as seriously or more seriously than I do? Do they consider Jesus as their number one priority.
Let's talk about that, because I really don't. I'm not saying there aren't other things underneath that. There are.
Sure.
But I'm just saying, if that one isn't in line, you just need to bail. I mean, and it's not.
Well, before, and this is what I say to people is, I said, before the chemistry convinces you that they value it as much, because you will convince yourself. You'll see warning signs early on. Oh, I'm the one who's always bringing up Jesus in the conversation. I'm the one who's always at church when they call me. I never call them, and they're at.
Or once we got really interested, they really seemed to get interested in Jesus once we got interested in each other.
Yes.
They told me they liked Jesus, but there was no evidence of that until we got interested in each other.
Yes.
And then all the evidence started showing up.
Or when there's a value being pushed, and I don't just mean sexual purity, but obviously sexual purity, but other things, I'm the only one going, well, Jesus would say do this. If I'm the only one bringing that up, I'd say eventually the chemistry will convince you. Oh, but no, I mean, and it's the old, I can change him. I can change her. I can get it. And you said this very well in your first teaching on this. You can't change the other person. No. You can pray for the other person. You can influence the other person, but it has to come from there. If you are at this level of your devotion to God and theirs is waning, there's not much you can do other than pray and influence and try to be a part, but they have to have that same desire. So yeah, I agree. I think that's number one, and that is the trump card. It doesn't matter on the other stuff.
And so I would say, I would just say, I know the biggest place to look for people is online. I get that. I don't think there's anything wrong. I have, with doing any of that. You just can't trust the answer to the survey.
Right.
You must figure out ways to figure out, are they devoted to Jesus or not? And I know that's where a lot of people get hung up. Them telling you they had an experience where they confessed Jesus and they're Christian, that doesn't mean much.
Yeah.
I mean,
it might, really, but the words don't mean much.
No,
right.
It might mean a lot.
Yes.
But I'm just saying you can't tell much from that, because there are very few politicians in this country that don't also say that.
Mm-hmm.
And it don't mean much in their instance from what I can see evidentially.
I've said this to some people that I've worked with before about this topic. I've said, the best way for you to know any of those things is you've got to put yourself and that person that you're interested in as many life situations as you can possibly put them in for as long as you can possibly put them in, and then just observe and see what happens. What is the direction of their life? You'll find out when you see them in happy situations, in stressful situations, in grief-stricken situations, in difficult, hard situations, when they're in pain, when they're not in pain. How do they respond? Where does their heart eventually point? In what direction?
That's good.
And if you see their heart is constantly being pointed towards and drawn towards the way of Jesus, well, that's a pretty good indication that the words meant something.
Yeah. And particularly if you're late 30s or 40s and you all have both, or I guess at any point, but particularly if you're millennial, you were saying that, and I've built a life and this other person has built a life. And I find that they are putting me equal with Jesus. Like, they cancel commitments they had to wherever they were committed to. I'm assuming you're not both going to the same church. If you go to the same church, y'all just watch each other.
Yeah.
But I mean, if they start canceling stuff they were doing to go do things with me, that might be a problem. Particularly if we haven't moved way down the track of our relationship, which I'd encourage you not to do, because it's priority number one.
Yeah.
If you haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, I would just spend as much time as I can trying to figure this out. And one good way of doing that, I think a little bit in similar vein, but a little different than what both Jason and Ed have said. There's this phrase that I first heard Andy Stanley say it, but I've been using it. I used it the last, 3-4 years I was doing youth ministry. And during this series, my wife has been doing some teaching with our youth about dating and sex and marriage and all these different things, trying to help them get their sights set. And she's been using this phrase a lot too, which is instead of go out and look for the one, picture the one that you really can imagine being the perfect one for you. You start by be the one you're looking for is looking for.
Yep.
And what that means is if you want this, and so the way I say it to my daughters is if you want a godly man who prioritizes reading the scriptures every day and praying to God and serving in the church and giving to the poor and all those things, the easiest way to find that guy is you start going doing those things. And like you said, start looking around and going, who are the guys who are taking this seriously? And so I'll say to my daughters now, because they're getting to that age where they're starting to get interested in boys. There's really no proper dating on the horizon, but they're starting to I got a crush and I got this. And they'll occasionally say to me when they'll be like, I think that boy's kind of cute. And they'll say, and he takes Jesus very seriously. Now, whether he does, I don't know. But they're looking at church. Yeah. They're at church and they're looking at the boys they know at church and they're looking and seeing, do they contribute, at 12 and 13 and those, do they contribute in the small group discussion? And are they taking it serious? All their kind of their little metrics.
And that's the very conversation I'm having with my daughter who's about to go to college.
Right.
As what environments do you plan to put yourself in while you're away?
Right.
And she's thinking in terms of all of that stuff. And one of the things that I constantly, her mom and I will constantly say to her is, where are you going to worship? Yeah. Where are you going to serve? Where are you going to gather with your brothers and sisters in Christ in that city where you're going to be at? And involve yourself in the life that Jesus is living over there with those people, because I know this stage of life that she's in, unlike your kids, it's getting to that place where that will be a realistic goal of hers to look around and go, where's some dudes?
That's right.
And I want her to
and even if she's not looking, just that way it goes. Sometimes you meet somebody.
Right. Or some dude will start looking at her.
Yeah.
Right. That can happen too.
That'll also be
And then he gives her attention and she goes, oh, that feels nice. And I want him to be a guy who is heart pointed toward Jesus too.
So you want her to be in environments where that dude is.
That's right.
Yes. I where that guy's going to be, not because she is there, but he's there because he wanted to be there.
Yeah, because, and here's the thing. So this is what I'll say for people who are beyond the college age, young kind of thing. I've seen this. I know both of y'all have seen this before of, single men and women, both, who start bringing a guy to church or start bringing a woman to church, and they get, and they're like, oh, he loves God because he's coming to church with me, or he loves, she loves God because she's coming to church with me. She gets involved, and then they get married, and because they weren't ever really involved in church before, their whatever desire, attendance, whatever pursuit of God goes back to what it was, and unfortunately, either the believer stays really faithful to God, and it's just this really difficult, always painful, heartbreaking situation of, I'm going to keep pursuing God, but I got to walk past you to go there. Or, and I've seen this happen too, almost as much. It is so painful and it's so heartbreaking. I start lessening my pursuit of God because I'm trying to come down to your level, maybe with the hopes of pulling you up. But I get kind of stuck where you're
I can't pull you up anymore because I'm no longer there.
Yeah,
that's the truth. It becomes a lowest common denominator. I do think I'm going to take a step or two down, but I think I'm still up at the step or two. Well, I'm not up there at the step or two anymore. So now I've come to enjoy the lower place.
Yeah.
It's just a world of pain that you're buying yourself in for one way or the other, somewhere down the road. And I know, it's easy for me to say because I've been married now almost 45 years. But, I'm the product of a woman who grew up a very committed Christian, who married a guy who was not a Christian. He committed to go to church with her. And I'll just say, if she had not been, she may be the most determined, stubborn person I've ever known in my life, and a very quiet. She wasn't outspoken like me. but she could not be deterred from, she knew what she wanted to do. And when he tried to distract her, it was just 15 years of suck is the way I call it. He didn't become a Christian for 15 years of their marriage. And, you know, she's pulling children and him and from place to try. And I'm thankful, thankful it all came out the way that it did. But I have been a pastor now for a long, long time. I don't have a second example of that.
Yeah.
She is my example of a person who disobeyed the scripture's command on being unequally yoked. I do not have a second one where the Christian stayed as strong and as firm, and eventually the other person.
So it's the exception, not the rule.
Yes. Yeah. I have some examples of people who stayed strong. There's some people in our church that are very strong in their faith and their spouses don't share it. And what I know is from talking to them, what I know is the rule is pain is your companion. That's your companion. And so I know there are other priorities. If you really want this, the base of that triangle is two people who are pursuing God.
Yeah.
And you really don't need to move on to anything else. And I was joking before we started filming, if I were in that place where I'm 65, I'm 45, I'm 50, and I'm single and I want to pursue something, and I've gotten on an online site and they tell me they're a Christian and they don't live in my town, and they wanted to do something with me on a Sunday, I'd say, well, first of all, it'll have to be in the afternoon because I, of course, serve. And I'm assuming you serve too, since you're a follower of Christ. Why don't you tell me where you're going to be serving? I would figure out ways to make me tell them to tell me about their commitment to Jesus and his body. Because if they immediately can start coming to church with me, oh, that's a clue. You know, if at 45, they've been a committed follower of Jesus and suddenly they can break all bonds they have with the local church, they don't share the same commitment I share.
Yeah. I think the other part of this that is important just to mention on it is if this is the number one priority, that means everything else is lesser, which means you're not looking for an ideal person.
Yes.
And I think this is a really important part. I remember this was years ago, but I read a book by, y'all know the comedian Aziz Ansari.
Yep.
He wrote a book because every comedian gets asked to write a book. And I remember getting his book because I thought he was hilarious. And his book's, I think it was called Modern Love at the time. But he basically said, I didn't know what to write about. So I went and found a sociologist and said, you do all this research. I'll write funny jokes on your research. He goes, and he wrote this book that was about research about modern dating, relationships, sex. And he basically, what I took from the book when I got it was, what has basically happened is because of the internet and because of the massive pool of possible relationships, most people are more dissatisfied with their partner because they are looking for an ideal that doesn't exist. We have been convinced by an algorithm to say, I'm going to find, and so I'll take our case, a godly man who cares about the scriptures and cares about other people and serves the poor and serves the local church, but also gets all my jokes and has the same common interests as me, understands all my references. We like to do the same hobbies. We like to X, Y, and Z. I'm going to find all of those things.
He looks like a model.
He looks like a model. And he's got enough money to take care of all my different things. And so what I'm saying, and what people keep saying is, I shouldn't have to settle. And what he talked about in the book was, he says, when you interview people who'd been married for 60, 70 years, because of, at the time, the book came out in like 2010 or 11. And he said those people had gotten married in the 40s and 50s. And you ask them, well, what first attracted you to her? the dudes would always be like, there were 3 girls in my graduating class, and I thought she was the prettiest of the 3. We dated for 6 weeks, got married, and we've been married for 60 years. And what they said is, and we learned how to be happy because we were committed to one another. And
well, that's the whole premise behind arranged marriage, which I know isn't our culture.
Sure.
Arranged marriages are, my mom and dad decided who I was married when I was 2.
Sure. And so what I would say, and this is what I'll often say to people who are in my age group or younger who are looking for someone to marry and they're dating, is that idea of, I think chemistry is a wonderful thing. I think C.S. Lewis is the person that says that, friendship is when you look at a person for the first time and say, oh, you too? That the first time you realize, oh, you get me, that there is a beautiful thing behind that. And often that's what we're chasing. But chemistry is not enough to build a covenant on. And what I have found is, if you will pursue, I want this. I want to build, as Jason said in the first one, is the couple is the client. The covenant is the client. If I go in with that mindset, if I'm looking for someone to build this covenant with, we can work on the other stuff that we talked about of the needs that get met and working together, and all that kind of stuff can get figured out if we all have the same goal. But even if we have great chemistry and great common interests, and what often gets told to me by people who are dating right now is you got to figure out the sex chemistry before you get married, because all of that stuff, in the example we said last, those are all higher needs.
Yeah.
If I start by figuring that out, not the basic need, which is, do we both want Christ? Are we both pursuing Christ? Those other things.
And I get it. I'll just say again, I had this conversation with somebody this last week about the series and what we're talking about. I get it if you've tried this and you thought you went for it and you got pain because the other person, and now you're burned, or you just think it can't exist. I get that, because our culture is messed up on this. And I get it if you're watching this and you think, you guys are off track. I mean, you're just off track. That's not even realistic. Well, we weren't here to be discussing what's realistic in our culture. We were talking about what God sees as the covenant relationship. We're describing to you what the covenant is as God describes it should be. And He's going to help us get there in a culture that frankly is running as hard as it can in the opposite direction, and is producing what that produces. A lot of people going after their own needs and are lonely and hurt and addicted and sad and trying to search on. And if that's not, if you like where the culture's going, don't try to tack God onto it. God is not an easy tack on. Mm-hmm. He just won't stand for it.
I think the other part that I would add to this as well is, to the point of, because it's so difficult, it's also why, and because there's probably not an ideal person, this idea of I'm looking for this one person who's going to meet all these other needs for me as well is not helpful, and it is a cancer you put on your spouse. I mean, that's something my wife and I, even just, later in marriage, are just discovering all the time more and more is, man, we are so committed to God and we are so committed to one another. But it's also okay that there are other people in our life that we need as well. This idea that it's just me and you for the rest of this. And so what I would encourage you at, as part of your being the one you're looking for is have strong Christian community in your life, where you don't see it as, if I don't find this person, my life is somehow less than. That if I cannot get this, which...
Well, because we haven't had a time to talk about all of that, but just being the couple was not God's ideal either.
That's right.
That was not the way. This is a part of way God, and He did start with the family and the couple, but it ain't the whole thing He's got for the flourishing of the world or the flourishing of the couple.
Mm-hmm. What were you going to say, Jay?
Oh, I lost it, but that's okay. That's okay.
No, I think that I think that's the idea, is Christ ultimately has to be the thing I'm pursuing and the person I'm pursuing. And his body is a part of pursuing him. And there is this life of flourishing that can exist in the church. And I'll admit, I think it's one of the challenges the church is going to have to face, and our church will have to face in coming years, is if we actually did inspire people to pursue the kind of marriage God, for a generation of people who are working on marriage number 1 at age 40.
That's right.
Which just in at least American culture has not been the case before.
No, that's right.
We're going to have to figure out, how does the church become the kind of family where people go, man, I am feeling fulfilled and I'm feeling part as I'm looking for this other thing that I also want, but I want to honor God and make a wise choice in finding a person who is pursuing these things. That's a thing the church is going to have to figure out. But the church is not the 6 or 7 of us on staff. It's all of us together.
All of us together.
And so that requires this push and pull on all of our parts to be willing to say, I'm going to get invested in my local body, and I'm going to get invested in this church family, and I'm going to care for other people's needs, and I'm going to be vulnerable enough to allow them to care for my needs. And then the hope is, as we've said, as I'm pursuing Christ in this way, maybe I'll look around and go, there is someone else doing this. And I'm not looking to go, now, did we binge the same things on Netflix? Do we have the same Spotify playlist? Do we have all these? And I know those are very trivial things, but I find
people that make them number 1.
And I go, maybe what you'll find is, as me and my wife do, is we don't like the same TV shows.
No.
My wife and I have learned she'll read books, and sometimes what I do is I watch shows that I don't like because she likes them. And sometimes she'll play video games while I'm watching a movie she don't like.
But my wife and I have, there are me shows, and then there are us shows.
Sure, yes.
And there are shows that I just know I ain't even going to invite her to watch because I know she hates it.
Yep.
If anything sci-fi related, my wife doesn't care a thing. So I'm just like, babe, I will watch that on my own time when you and I are apart. But, that's just the way it is.
That is the way it is.
What my wife and I have found is, because we both love God and we both are committed to this is the kind of life both of us want to build, what we find is that's the thing we love most about one another. And that has, you can, in the end, that's something you can build on.
All the other stuff will work out if you want it to.
That's right.
Because the Lord will want you to work it out. Mm-hmm. And he will be working in each of you individually to say, hey, you should go talk to her. Hey, you should talk to him.
Yes.
So my guess is, in the past few weeks that we've been saying all the things we didn't say on Sunday, it might have brought some questions up for you guys.
I hope so.
So if it did, click on that link in the description, send it to us, and we'll talk about that instead of this.
Yeah.
And the good news is, if you hated all the marriage stuff,
we're done.
We're finished.
We're done.
Unless you ask a bunch of questions.
Unless you ask a bunch of questions.
We'll see. We'll see what the people want.
Yeah, that's right.
See. All right.
We're men of the people.
We always
when it comes down, we're men of the people.
Mm-hmm.
The people's champ.
Yes. So do that. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.